They say secrets have a way of unraveling when you least expect them. One minute, you're standing on solid ground, thinking you have everything under control, and the next, the floor is ripped right from beneath your feet. I never thought it would happen to me. Never thought I would be the kind of person who could cross that line. But the thing about life is, it doesn't ask for permission before it pushes you into situations you never saw coming. And when it happens, you can either fight it or let it take you. I should have fought harder. I should have walked away. But I didn't. And that one moment of weakness? It changed everything. Forever. It started off as nothing. Just a normal day. The kind of day you don't think twice about. You wake up, go through your routine, say the same things you always say, hear the same sounds of life moving around you. But looking back now, I can see all the little signs. The whispers in the background that I ignored. The warning bells I refused to listen to. Maybe if I had, I wouldn't be sitting here now, spilling my soul to strangers on the internet, hoping someone, anyone, understands what I'm about to say. Maybe you'll judge me. Maybe you'll think I'm the worst kind of person. Or maybe you've been here too. Maybe you know exactly how it feels to stand at the edge of a decision that could shatter everything. If you do, then you already know. This isn't just a story. It's a confession. I can still remember the way the air felt that night. Thick. Still. Like something was waiting to happen. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the TV in the background. My husband was upstairs, probably asleep. I should have been with him. I should have gone to bed, shut my eyes, and let the night pass like any other. But instead, I was downstairs, with him. My nephew. He wasn't supposed to be there. It wasn't planned. But that's the thing about moments like these. They don't ask for permission. They just happen. And when they do, they leave behind a mess that no amount of time can ever clean up. I remember the way he looked at me. Not like family. Not like a boy who had grown up calling me aunt. It was different. And the worst part? I felt it too. I should have stopped it. I should have walked away. But the truth is, I didn't want to. And that's why, when he suddenly walked in that night, when his eyes met mine, when the silence stretched so thick between us that I could barely breathe, I knew. I knew my secret had just been exposed. And there was no going back. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand something. This isn't the kind of story where the ending ties up neatly with a bow. It's messy. It's complicated. And it's real. So if you think you know how this goes, trust me, you don't. But you will. Because I'm going to tell you everything. Every single moment. Every single mistake. Every single thing I lost. But before I do, take a second. Breathe. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to Shocking Infidelity Saga. Because this is just the beginning. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. I used to believe love had a rhythm. A pattern. That once you found it, you could hold on to it forever, like a song stuck in your head, playing on repeat. I was wrong. Love doesn't fade overnight. It doesn't shatter in a single moment. No, it erodes slowly, quietly, until one day, you wake up next to someone and they feel like a stranger. That was my marriage. I was married for years. Enough years to forget what it felt like to be wanted. Enough years for the weight of routine to settle into my bones like a second skin. My husband, he was a good man. At least, that's what I told myself. He didn't yell. He didn't cheat. He didn't do anything wrong. But that was the problem, wasn't it? He didn't do anything at all. Somewhere along the way, we stopped talking. I don't even know when it happened, not exactly. It was gradual. Small moments of silence that stretched longer and longer until they became our normal. We lived in the same house, but we might as well have been ghosts haunting separate rooms. He worked late. I went to bed early. Our conversations were reduced to the essentials: bills, schedules, groceries. And intimacy? God, I don't even remember the last time he touched me like he meant it. I used to think loneliness was about being alone. But the worst kind of loneliness? It's being unseen. It's standing in a room with someone who promised to love you forever and feeling invisible. That feeling, it burrows under your skin. It changes you in ways you don't even realize until it's too late. That's when I started to notice him. My nephew. He wasn't a child anymore. That much should have been obvious. But when someone grows up in front of you, you don't really see the changes. Not at first. At first, he was just the boy who used to visit during summers. The one who would run around barefoot in my backyard, kicking up dust and laughing like the world was his. The one who used to call me auntie like it was the funniest word in the world. But time has a way of reshaping things. The boy I used to know had grown into a man, and I hadn't even noticed. Not until he walked through my door one evening, taller, older, his voice deeper than I remembered. There was something about him, something in the way he carried himself. Confident. Sure of himself. It was so different from the energy my husband had. So different from the life I had gotten used to. I should have seen it for what it was. I should have been careful. He started visiting more often. At first, it was nothing. Just casual. He would stop by, stay for dinner, sit across from me at the table while my husband scrolled through his phone, barely present. And I noticed things. The way he listened when I talked, really listened. How his eyes stayed on mine just a little too long. How he laughed at my jokes in a way that made me feel like I was interesting again. It was intoxicating, being seen. The way he would look at me, it made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. Like I wasn't just a wife or a woman stuck in a routine. Like I was desirable. Like I was someone who could still be wanted. And I didn't realize how badly I needed that feeling until it was already too late. The nights were the worst. Lying in bed next to my husband, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of his presence but none of the warmth. I started thinking about my nephew more than I should have. Remembering the way his voice sounded when he said my name. The way his eyes lingered when he thought I wasn't looking. I hated myself for it. But I didn't stop. I don't know when it became something more. Maybe it was the night we stayed up too late, talking in the dim glow of the kitchen while my husband slept upstairs. Maybe it was the way his fingers brushed mine when he handed me a glass of wine, the way neither of us moved away. Maybe it was the moment I saw it in his eyes, the shift. That unspoken tension, thick and undeniable. And instead of shutting it down, instead of putting distance between us like I should have, I let it linger. I let it grow. I look back now, and I wish I had done things differently. I wish I had recognized the warning signs. The way my heart raced when he texted me. The way I caught myself dressing up on the nights I knew he would be over. The way I let a door open that should have stayed shut. But I didn't. And before I knew it, I was already standing on the edge of something dangerous. Something I couldn't take back. And the night he walked in on me? That was the moment the ground beneath me finally gave way. If you think you know where this is going, trust me, you don't. Because what happened next? It changed everything. Forever. It happened on a night like any other. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The house was warm, filled with the low hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the distant sound of laughter from another room. Family gatherings were supposed to be ordinary, predictable. A few hours of forced smiles and polite small talk, of pretending everything was fine. But that night, nothing was ordinary. That night, something shifted. I don't even know when it started. Maybe it was during dinner, when he sat across from me, his gaze lingering just a second too long. The way his knee brushed mine under the table, and neither of us moved away. Or maybe it was the way his voice wrapped around my name when he spoke it, low and smooth, like a secret only we shared. Small things. Innocent, if you weren't looking closely. But I was looking. And so was he. I remember standing in the kitchen afterward, my hands moving on autopilot, washing dishes while voices drifted from the other room. I didn't hear him walk in, but I felt him. Close. Too close. His presence was a weight behind me, heavy and warm. I could feel the heat of him before I even turned around. And when I did, I should have looked away. I should have laughed it off, made some excuse to put space between us. But I didn't. His eyes held mine. Steady. Searching. There was something unspoken in that look. Something dangerous. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, too loud, too fast. I should have said something. Anything. But the words caught in my throat. Because in that moment, I realized something. I wanted this. I wanted the way he looked at me. The way his presence wrapped around me, making me feel something I hadn't felt in so long. Alive. Wanted. He reached past me, his arm brushing mine as he set a glass in the sink. A simple movement. Innocent. But my body reacted before my mind could stop it. A shiver down my spine. A sharp inhale. And he noticed. Of course he noticed. Because when I glanced up, he was still looking at me. And this time, I saw it. The shift. The moment when something unspoken turned into something undeniable. I don't know how long we stood there, staring at each other, caught in that charged silence. But it was long enough. Long enough for me to understand that we had just stepped over a line. A line we could never uncross. A voice called from the other room, breaking the moment. I flinched. He stepped back. The spell shattered, leaving behind a tension so thick, I could barely breathe through it. I turned away, my hands gripping the edge of the counter like I needed something solid to hold on to. And in that moment, one thought echoed in my mind. This is wrong, isn't it? I thought that would be the end of it. A mistake. A moment of weakness. But some things, once set in motion, can't be undone. Because later that night, after the dishes were put away and the guests had left, after my husband had gone upstairs without a second glance, I checked my phone, and there it was. A message. Just 2 words. But they changed everything. Still awake. I should have ignored it. But I didn't. I should have deleted it. But instead, I typed back. And that was the beginning. The moment the cracks in my life became too wide to fix. The moment I let myself believe that wanting something meant it was mine to have. The moment I lost control. I didn't mean for this to happen. That's what I told myself. Over and over again. But if that was true, then why did it feel like I had been walking toward this moment for a long, long time? Why did it feel inevitable? The message changed everything. It was small. Just 2 words. But they held weight. A weight I felt pressing against my ribs, making it hard to breathe. I should have ignored it. I could have turned off my phone, rolled over, and gone to sleep beside my husband, let the night pass like all the ones before it. But instead, I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my heart pounding in my ears. And then, before I could talk myself out of it, I typed back. Yeah, I am. That was the moment. Not when I first noticed him. Not when our eyes lingered too long in the kitchen. Not even when I first felt the rush of something I shouldn't have felt. No. The moment I sent that message, that was the moment I chose this. Even if I didn't want to admit it yet. The conversation was harmless. That's what I told myself. Just a late-night chat. A few words exchanged. Nothing serious. Nothing real. But when I woke up the next morning, my first thought wasn't of my husband. It was of him. That scared me. More than I wanted to admit. Because suddenly, he was everywhere. In my thoughts. In my routines. In the quiet moments where my mind should have been blank. I caught myself waiting for my phone to light up, hoping, praying for another message. I would linger in the kitchen, wondering if he would come over. My pulse would spike at the sound of a car pulling into the driveway, my stomach twisting with something I didn't want to name. And when he was near me, when he spoke, when his eyes locked onto mine in that way that made my breath hitch, I felt it. A pull. A hunger. Something dangerous. Something I should have been strong enough to fight. But I wasn't. The heart is a traitor. It whispers things we know we shouldn't listen to. It makes excuses. It bends the truth. And mine? Mine was telling me that this wasn't wrong. That I wasn't hurting anyone. That it was just attention. Just harmless conversations. Just stolen glances. Nothing more. But deep down, I knew better. Because every time my husband spoke to me, his voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. Every time he reached for my hand, it felt foreign. Every time I sat across from him at dinner, all I could think about was him. The way my nephew's voice sent a shiver down my spine. The way he looked at me, like he saw me in a way no one else did. And the way, for the first time in years, I felt like a woman again. Not a wife. Not a routine. A woman. But with every moment of thrill came the crash of guilt. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, my body tense, my mind running in endless circles. What was I doing? What was I thinking? This was wrong. It was wrong, wasn't it? And yet, why did it feel so right? I started avoiding my husband. Not obviously. Not enough for him to notice. But enough that I could feel it. I stopped asking him about his day. Stopped looking him in the eye when he spoke. Stopped reaching for him in the dark. And he didn't seem to notice. Or maybe, deep down, he had stopped looking for me too. Maybe we had both given up a long time ago, and I was just the first one to act on it. The guilt came in waves. Some nights, it crashed over me, pulling me under, making me feel like I was drowning. Other nights, it was quieter. A dull ache in the background. Something I could ignore if I tried hard enough. But the desire? The pull toward him? That never faded. It only grew stronger. More insistent. More impossible to resist. And I knew it was only a matter of time before I stopped trying to resist at all. This was only the beginning. And I was already too far gone. I used to think that once you crossed a line, there was no going back. That there would be a moment, clear and defined, where you could say, this is where I fell. This is where I lost control. But that's not how it happens. Not really. You don't leap into it. You inch forward. Little by little. Step by step. Until one day, you look back and realize the ground behind you has disappeared. And there's nothing left but the fall. It started small. A glance held a second too long. A casual touch that lingered just enough to make my skin burn. Late-night messages that meant nothing, until they meant everything. It was never supposed to go further than that. It was just a distraction. Just harmless. Just something to remind me I was still alive. But the thing about fire? It doesn't stay small. It spreads. And once it starts, you can't control where it goes. The messages became more frequent. What started as an occasional, still awake, turned into long conversations that stretched past midnight. We talked about everything. Things I hadn't said out loud in years. He listened. He understood. He made me feel like I mattered. And that was more dangerous than anything else. Because when someone makes you feel seen after years of being invisible, you don't want to let it go. I told myself it was nothing. Just words. Just company. Just someone to fill the silence my husband left behind. But then came the night I made my first real mistake. The night I stopped pretending this wasn't something more. It was late. The house was quiet. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, my phone in my hand, his name glowing on the screen. Him, can't sleep? Me, not really. Him, me neither. A pause. A heartbeat. Then another message. Him, come outside. My breath caught. I stared at the words, my pulse hammering in my chest. No. That was my first thought. That was the only rational thought. I should have put my phone down. Should have turned over. Should have forced myself to sleep. But instead, I got up. I moved like I wasn't in control of my own body, like something stronger than logic was pulling me toward the door. The house was dark. My husband was asleep upstairs. The floor was cold beneath my bare feet as I tiptoed toward the back door, my hands trembling as I reached for the handle. One deep breath. And then, I stepped outside. He was standing there, just beyond the porch light, his face barely visible in the shadows. The air between us felt electric, charged with something we didn't dare name. Neither of us spoke. We didn't have to. Because in that moment, in the quiet space between us, we both knew. This wasn't nothing. This wasn't harmless. This was a line we were about to cross. And once we did, there would be no going back. The wind was soft that night. The kind that moves slowly, like it's carrying secrets. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, my hands curled into fists at my sides. I should have turned around. Should have walked away. But then he stepped closer. And my body. It didn't move back. His voice was low when he spoke. I can't stop thinking about you. 6 words. That's all it took. 6 words and suddenly, the air was too thick, my skin was too hot, my chest was too tight. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because what was I supposed to say? That I felt it too? That I had been fighting it for weeks, but I was losing. That every time I closed my eyes, it was his face I saw. That every time my phone buzzed, my stomach twisted with anticipation and fear all at once. "Tell me to stop," he said. His voice was quiet, almost pleading. He was giving me an out. A final chance to fix this before it was too late. Before we both made a mistake we couldn't take back. And in that moment, I almost did. The words sat on the tip of my tongue. "This is wrong. We can't do this." I could have said them. I should have said them. But instead, I just stood there, silent, breathless, wanting. The space between us was gone. I could feel his breath against my skin. The warmth of him so close, it made my whole body tense. I was drowning in it. The moment, the heat, the possibility. One move, one shift, and we would be past the point of no return. A noise from inside the house snapped me back. A floorboard creaking upstairs. My husband's footsteps. Reality hit me like ice water. The thrill, the fear, the undeniable danger of what I was doing. My stomach dropped. What the hell was I thinking? I stepped back. Fast. Too fast. The distance between us felt unnatural now, like something had just been ripped away. His jaw clenched. His hands curled into fists. He wanted to say something. I could see it in his eyes. But instead, he just exhaled sharply and looked away. A moment later, he was gone. I stood there, frozen in place, my pulse hammering in my ears. My skin still burned where his breath had touched it. My heart still ached with something I didn't want to name. And my mind? It was screaming. I had almost kissed him. Outside my own home, with my husband asleep inside, with my whole life hanging by a thread. And the worst part? I wasn't relieved that I had stopped it. I was devastated. Because I knew, deep in my bones, that this wasn't over. Not even close. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. Was it him? Was it someone who knew? Because secrets don't stay hidden forever. And sooner or later, this one was going to destroy me. There are moments in life that split everything into before and after. Moments so sharp, so irreversible, that you feel the ground shift beneath you as they happen. And you know, deep in your bones, you will never be the same again. This was mine. This was the moment everything shattered. I wasn't thinking. I hadn't been thinking for a long time. Desire had a way of blinding me, of making everything else fade into the background. The weight of consequences. The possibility of getting caught. The reality of what I was doing. None of it mattered in those stolen moments. Not when he looked at me the way he did. Not when my pulse raced at the sound of his voice. Not when my whole body ached with the need for something I knew I shouldn't want. And that night, I wasn't thinking at all. It was late. Too late. The kind of late where the world feels quieter, more dangerous, like anything could happen in the darkness. The kind of late where mistakes don't feel like mistakes until the morning. I was in the living room alone. Or at least, I thought I was. The glow of my phone screen was the only light, illuminating the message I had just sent. Come over. 2 words. That's all. I shouldn't have sent them. I shouldn't have even thought them. But I had. And now, it was too late to take them back. The minutes stretched, each one heavier than the last. The house was silent, but my mind wasn't. Every nerve in my body was tight, every breath shallow, every heartbeat a countdown to something I couldn't predict. Would he come? Would I let him in? Or was this the night I finally found the strength to stop? A sound. A soft creak of the floor. Not from outside. From inside. From behind me. I froze. Every hair on my body stood on end. And then, "Auntie?" The voice cut through me like a knife. Low. Confused. Not his voice. Not the one I had been waiting for. I turned too fast, my breath caught in my throat, my stomach already sinking. And there he was. My nephew. Standing in the doorway. Staring at me. Eyes flickering from my phone to my face, something shifting in his expression. Something I couldn't place. Shock? Confusion? Or something else? The air in the room changed. Thick. Heavy. Suffocating. He had seen something. Maybe he had heard something. Maybe he had known something long before this moment. But now? Now there was no pretending. No backtracking. No hiding the truth that had been slowly unraveling between us for weeks. It was here. Raw. Exposed. And I had nowhere to run. "What are you doing?" His voice was quieter now. Measured. Too careful. And I didn't know how to answer. I could feel my hands trembling, my pulse hammering so loudly I thought it might shake the walls. I wanted to lie. To laugh it off. To say nothing and pretend that was true. But he was looking at me. Really looking at me. And suddenly, I felt naked. Exposed in a way I had never been before. Because the truth wasn't just in my phone. It was in my face. In my breath. In the way my body had stiffened. The way my fingers curled around the device like it held something incriminating. Because it did. And he knew it. "Who were you texting?" A simple question. But it landed like a blow to the chest. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I could have said anything. I could have given him a name. Any name. But I didn't. Because I couldn't. Because no matter how badly I wanted to erase the last few seconds, I knew the truth was already sinking into him. And no lie would ever be enough to pull it back out. The silence between us stretched. Too long. Too thick. His eyes darkened, understanding something I hadn't spoken. Something I never should have let him understand. And then, the shift. The moment that sent ice through my veins. His lips parted. A slow inhale. Then, "It's him, isn't it?" My stomach dropped. I didn't know how he knew. Maybe he had suspected for weeks. Maybe he had seen something before this moment. Or maybe it was just that obvious. Maybe my secret had been bleeding out of me for so long, I had been the only one blind to it. I wanted to speak, to deny, to deflect. But all I could do was stare at him. And he stared back. His jaw clenched. His hands curled into fists at his sides. Not in anger. Not in betrayal. But in something else. Something unreadable. Something dangerous. I couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in. This was it. The moment everything shattered. The moment I knew deep in my bones that nothing would ever be the same again. He took a step back. Shook his head. Just once. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. I sat there. Frozen. Heart pounding. Mouth dry. Watching him disappear into the shadows. And as the silence wrapped around me like a noose, one thought slammed into me so hard, I could barely stay upright. What have I done? I wanted to chase after him. To explain. To fix it. But how do you fix something that never should have happened in the first place? How do you take back a moment that has already destroyed everything? I sat there for a long time. Long after the house went quiet again. Long after I knew, without a doubt, that there was no undoing what had just been done. That this secret, this moment, had just ruined me. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind unraveling, playing the moment over and over again. The look on his face. The way his expression had shifted, realization creeping in like a slow, cold tide. The way he had stepped back, like I was something he needed to get away from. Like he had seen something he was never supposed to see. And now he knew. Morning came too soon. The house felt different, like something invisible had cracked beneath the surface, and I was the only one who could hear it breaking. I moved through the motions, but nothing felt real. I poured coffee. I made breakfast. I listened to my husband talk about his plans for the day, nodding at the right times, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was unraveling. Because every second that passed, one thought circled in my head, relentless and sharp. What if he tells? The paranoia settled in quickly. Every sound in the house made my pulse jump. Every glance from across the table felt like an accusation. Every moment stretched too long, filled with the deafening silence of the thing we weren't saying. And then, he walked in. My nephew. The moment I saw him, my stomach twisted so hard I thought I might be sick. His expression was unreadable. His shoulders tense. His movements careful. He didn't look at me. Not really. Just a brief glance, too quick, too forced. And then he sat down, staring at his plate like he wished he were anywhere else. The room felt small. Too small. The air too thick, pressing in on me from all sides. I couldn't stop looking at him. Couldn't stop searching his face for any sign of what he was thinking. Did he hate me? Did he pity me? Or worse, was he going to tell? I tried to act normal. Tried to pretend that nothing had changed. But it had. Everything had. Because now, there was something between us. Something silent and poisonous, wrapping around every word, every glance, every moment. And I wasn't the only one who felt it. I could see it in him too. The stiffness in his posture. The way he kept his head down. The way his hands clenched into fists, then released, over and over again, like he was trying to hold something back. I wanted to talk to him. To pull him aside, to explain, to fix whatever was breaking. But what could I even say? How do you explain something that shouldn't have happened? How do you take back something that's already been seen? I kept waiting for it. For the explosion. For the confrontation. For him to stand up in the middle of breakfast, look me in the eye, and say it. To rip the truth out of the silence and lay it bare for everyone to see. But he didn't. Instead, he stood up, mumbled something about needing fresh air, and walked out. Not looking at me. Not once. And that was somehow worse. Because now I didn't know what was coming. The rest of the day was a blur. I felt like a ghost in my own home, floating through rooms, my body moving, but my mind stuck in an endless cycle of fear and guilt. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped into my throat. Every time someone looked at me for too long, I felt exposed, like they could see it on me. Like they knew. Like it was written all over my skin. My husband noticed something was off. "You okay?" he asked that evening, his brow furrowed, concern flickering in his eyes. And for a second, just a second, I thought about telling him. Not the truth, but something. Anything to unload the weight pressing down on my chest. "Yeah," I said instead, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Just tired. And that was the truth, wasn't it? I was tired. Tired of the guilt. Tired of the fear. Tired of living in a moment I couldn't undo. But the worst part? I wasn't just afraid of being caught. I was afraid of something else. Something darker. Something I couldn't say out loud. Because beneath all the regret, beneath all the shame, there was a part of me that still wanted him. And I hated myself for it. This wasn't over. Not yet. Not even close. Because secrets don't just disappear. They grow. They fester. They wait. And I knew, deep down, with a bone-deep certainty, that this was only the beginning. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It was never supposed to go this far. I thought I could control it. I thought I could play with fire and never get burned. That I could flirt with the edge of something dangerous without falling in. That it was just harmless glances. Just words. Just moments. But secrets have a way of unraveling. Of slipping through the cracks, sinking into places you never meant for them to go. And once they start, they don't stop. I keep replaying it. Every choice. Every mistake. The night in the kitchen. The way my breath hitched when he stood too close. The way his eyes lingered on mine just a second too long. That first message. That first stolen moment. That first time I let my heart override my mind. And now I can't unsee it. Can't undo it. Can't take it back. So what now? What do I do with this? Do I bury it? Do I pretend nothing happened? Do I keep walking forward like I haven't already burned everything to the ground? Or do I tell the truth? Do I rip this secret out of the shadows and expose it to the light? Would that be the right thing to do? Or would it just be selfish? Would it be an attempt to ease my own guilt at the cost of everything else? Because the truth won't set me free. It will ruin lives. It will destroy families. It will break people who don't deserve to be broken. So maybe the only thing I can do is carry it. Bear the weight of it alone. Let the guilt carve its place inside me. Let it rot me from the inside out. Because that's what I deserve. Isn't it? And yet, even now, after everything, after the shame, after the regret, after watching the way he avoided my eyes, the way he stepped back from me like I was something toxic, something wrong, even after all of it, there's still a part of me that wants. A part of me that aches in a way I can't explain. A part of me that still feels the ghost of his presence, the warmth of his breath against my skin, the possibility that once existed between us. And that part of me? It makes me hate myself even more. Because I know the truth. The kind of truth that can't be erased, no matter how many lies I tell myself. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't something that just happened. I let it. I wanted it. And that is the hardest thing to admit. Because if I admit that, I have to face the person I've become. And I don't know if I can live with her. I used to think love was simple. You meet someone. You build a life. You stay. But it's not simple. Not when years pass. Not when loneliness creeps in like a slow-moving tide. Not when the version of yourself that once felt whole starts to feel like a stranger. And when someone comes along, someone who looks at you like you matter, like you're alive again, what do? Do you push them away? Do you resist? Or do you let yourself feel, just for a moment, before the world comes crashing down? I thought I could have both. My marriage. And my secret. But you can't live with a foot in two worlds. Eventually, one of them crumbles beneath you. And I think mine just did. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if this ends in silence. Or if everything I've built is about to fall apart. But one thing is certain. No matter how this ends, I will never be the same again. I have told you everything. Every choice. Every mistake. Every moment that led me to this point. And now, I need to ask you something. Have you ever felt yourself crossing a line you never meant to? Have you ever stood at the edge of something you knew was wrong, but stepped forward anyway? If you have, then maybe you understand. Maybe you know what it's like to feel trapped inside your own choices. To want something so badly, even when you know you shouldn't. To lie awake at night, battling between what's right and what feels right. So tell me, what would you do in my situation? Would you come clean? Would you confess, rip the truth out of the dark and let the consequences rain down where they may? Or would you bury it? Pretend it never happened, push it so deep inside yourself that, over time, maybe, just maybe, it would disappear? Tell me the truth. Because I can't be the only one who has ever felt this way. Can I? Was I wrong? Or was I just a victim of my own loneliness? I need to know. I need to hear it from you. Because right now, I don't even know who I am anymore. If you want to hear more real-life confessions that will make you question everything you thought you knew about love, desire, and betrayal, subscribe to Shocking Infidelity Saga. Turn on your notifications. Because trust me, this is just one story. And you won't believe what comes next. Loneliness is dangerous. It makes you do things you never imagined. It makes you cross lines you never saw coming. And once you cross them, you can't go back. Not really. You can tell yourself you will. You can lie, pretend, rewrite history inside your own mind. But the truth? The truth never leaves. It lingers in the air, in the space between moments. It stays in your skin, in your thoughts, in the silence of your own mind. And no matter how hard you try to run from it, you will always know. You will always remember. Some mistakes can be undone. Others stay with you forever.